Hello, my name is John, and today I'll be presenting my banking application Capstone project for MIT xPRO. Alright, let's begin with the front-end architecture, authentication, and app diagram. Alright, here's the application overview. You can see two main blocks. One is the client and the other is the server. In the client block, it shows all of the technologies used for the front end, and in the server block, it shows the technologies used for the back end. So in the client, we have React, which is where all of the React components and React pages are. In the middle there, we have a GraphQL API, which is responsible for fetching and sending data to the server API, and then it distributes all of that data to the React pages and components. We also have another layer, which is for the Firebase authentication, and the Firebase authentication essentially just manages all of the accounts. So users can create accounts and log in using Firebase. So the GraphQL API and React web app are inside a GitHub repository, and that repository is connected to AWS Amplify. So whenever AWS Amplify detects that new changes have been added to the GitHub repository, it then rebuilds and redeploys the new code and sends it to Hostinger. And then Hostinger just really hosts the application on the URL. So on the server, we have a node data access layer, a GraphQL API, and a MongoDB. So the GraphQL API fetches and sends data to the MongoDB, and they are managed by the node data access layer. So the data access layer makes sure that the data is in the right format, and it just really makes sure that the data is correct and can be used throughout the whole application. So the data access layer and the API are inside a Docker container, and then that Docker container is deployed on a DigitalOcean droplet. So the DigitalOcean droplet is also connected on a subdomain of my main domain. So my main domain is johnbarrettobankingapplication.online, and my subdomain for the backend is backend.johnbarretto, etc., etc. So then on the GraphQL API, it connects to that domain, but I will explain that later. All right, here for the front-end architecture, I used React. You can see I have an SRC folder with all the components and all of the pages. I have also some important files such as the account context, the app.js, which is the parent component. I have the Firebase config file, the styles, images, and so on. Let me just begin by talking a little bit of my UI decisions. I kept it simple. I'm using the Bootstrap 5 models, tables, components, colors, all of that. So it's all standard with Bootstrap. So for the routing, I managed to keep it on a single page application, so it feels like a very smooth experience for the users. And to do that, I used React routing. So users can navigate between pages seamlessly. They click, it's instant. They go to that page. And the cool thing is that I added the account context. And in the context is where all of the API fetching is. So there you can see two mutations, which is get balance and get transactions. So those get the transactions from the database, and I'll show how that's done later. And then that account, that stores that data in the context. And then you can see in the components routing how those components are surrounded by the account provider. So that the account provider makes sure that data is equally distributed to all of the components in the application. So for the authentication, I used Firebase. I used two methods of authentication. One is with the sign in with Google, so people can create an account and log in with Google, and then they get displayed this Firebase pop-up login thing. But they can also just straight up create or log in account with email or password. I have this Firebase config file, so all of my important keys are on a .env file, an environment file, so that's pretty secure. And then I have a little example code snippet there on how a function handles the create account. So whenever a user creates the account, that data is sent to Firebase, so it's stored in Firebase, and it's also sent to a GraphQL mutation, and that mutation sends that data to the backend, which then the backend stores it in the MongoDB. and I'll explain that also in the next video. So a few challenges I had. Yes, it was a little bit complicated connecting with this with the Firebase. I had some IP configuration errors, so I just had to manage that. It was quite simple actually on the console. Making sure that the data was sent for the Firebase and also the backend, that was also important. Making sure that those keys were secure on the environment files, and just little small tiny problems that I had to fix along the way, but all managed properly.